I keep a small plant nursery on about 3 acres outside of Millbrook, New York, and I have been doing it alone for going on 4 years now, ever since Claire and I signed the papers, and I bought out her share of a life we had both stopped believing in somewhere around year 6. The nursery was not something I planned. After the divorce, I needed work that kept my hands busy and my mind quiet, and a friend mentioned that the old Hartwell property on Route 44 was sitting empty. The greenhouses were in bad shape. The irrigation lines had cracked. The soil in the raised beds had gone hard and gray from neglect. But the price was low and the solitude was complete, and at that point in my life those were the only 2 things I was shopping for. My name is Daniel Reeves. I am 38 years old. I grow perennials, mostly coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, lavender, Russian sage. In the spring I take on annuals for the garden centers in Rhinebeck and Red Hook. It is not a glamorous business. My truck smells like compost. My hands are always rough. Most evenings I eat dinner by myself at the kitchen table with the back door open so I can hear the frogs in the small pond at the edge of the property, and then I go to bed early because 4:30 comes fast. That was my life the morning Nora showed up. It was a Tuesday in early October. I remember because I had just finished a delivery run, and I was trying to get a damaged cold frame repaired before the first hard frost, which the forecast was putting at Thursday. I was kneeling in the dirt behind the main greenhouse when I heard a car come slow up the gravel drive and stop. I did not recognize the sound. I stood up and walked around the side of the building, and there was a silver hatchback with a cracked left taillight sitting in front of the house, and a woman pulling a single bag from the back seat. I almost did not recognize her. She had cut her hair short since the last time I saw her, which was at Claire's birthday dinner almost 3 years earlier. She was wearing a canvas jacket that was too light for October, and she was looking at the ground when she heard me come around the corner, and then she looked up. "Daniel," she said. That was all. Nora Whitfield. Claire's younger sister by 4 years. She had always been quieter than Claire, more careful with words, the kind of person who watched a room before she entered it. I had liked her from the beginning, back when Claire and I were first together, and she was finishing her degree at SUNY Geneseo. She had a dry sense of humor, and she never pretended to find things funny that were not. I had always thought she was one of the most honest people I had ever met, which made it strange that I knew almost nothing about her life after the divorce, because Claire had made sure that most things connecting me to her family were cut cleanly. "Nora," I said. "Hey." She nodded toward the nursery. "The greenhouses. I found it on Google Maps. I hope that is okay. I did not know if I should call first." She paused. "I was not sure you would pick up." I told her I would have picked up. She did not look like she was sure of that. I asked her if she wanted to come inside, and she said yes, and we walked into the house and I put on coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table and she wrapped both hands around the mug before it was even full. Like she needed the warmth more than the coffee. I asked her what was going on. She looked at the table for a moment. Then she said, "Aaron and I are not getting married. Aaron Marsh." She had been engaged to him for almost 2 years. I had heard about it secondhand, through a mutual acquaintance from the old neighborhood. I had sent a card when I heard, which in retrospect was probably strange, but it seemed rude not to. I never heard back, which was fine. "I am sorry," I said. "I am not," she said. And then she looked up and there was something in her face that was not grief exactly. It was more like the expression a person has when they have been holding their breath for a long time, and they have finally been allowed to stop. "I am not sorry at all, actually. That is the honest answer. I do not have anywhere to go right now. My lease on the apartment in Albany is up at the end of the month, and I stayed too long, and I did not line anything up because I kept thinking we were going to work it out, and then we did not, and She stopped. I drove for an hour and a half before I realized I did not have a destination. I asked her how she had ended up here. She looked at me carefully. "Because you were always decent to me," she said. "Even after everything with Claire, you sent a card. That is more than most people did." She slept in the spare room that night, and the next morning I went out at 4:30 as usual and let her sleep. I did not want her to feel like she needed to explain herself again or earn her place. When I came back in around 7 to refill my thermos, she was already up, and she had made a pot of oatmeal and left half of it on the stove with the lid on, and there was a note on the counter that said, "Gone to get my things sorted. Will be back by noon. Thank you." That was the first thing I noticed about Nora. She was tidy in the way that people are tidy when they have been made to feel like a burden before. Everything she did was careful and unobtrusive. She wiped down the counter after herself. She kept her bag in the corner of the room and not spread across the floor. She never ate the last of anything without asking first. She came back at noon like she said she would. She had 2 boxes and a duffel bag in the back of the hatchback, and she carried them in herself, and I helped with the boxes without making a thing of it, and we did not discuss how long she was planning to stay. That afternoon she asked if there was anything she could do around the property to help. I told her she did not have to do that. She said she knew she did not have to, and she was asking because she wanted to. So I put her to work pulling up the spent annuals in the front beds, which is not interesting work, and she did it without complaint for 2 hours, and when she came in, she had dirt under her fingernails, and she looked more relaxed than she had the day before. We fell into a rhythm in those first 2 weeks, without really talking about it. I was up before dawn and gone to the greenhouses, and she would make coffee and sometimes bring a travel mug out to wherever I was working, set it down without interrupting, and go back to the house. She was looking for work. She had a background in landscape design, which I had not known, and she was sending out applications to firms in Poughkeepsie and Kingston. And she spent part of each afternoon on her laptop at the kitchen table with her reading glasses on and her hair pulled back. Some evenings we ate dinner together, and some evenings she had already eaten or I had, and neither of us made it complicated. One night in the 3rd week, she was helping me inventory the perennial stock for a spring catalog, and she stopped with her clipboard in her hand and she said, without looking at me, "Can I ask you something?" I said yes. She said, "Did you know? When you were still with Claire, did you know it was going to end?" I thought about it for a while before I answered. I said, I think I knew around year 5, but I did not admit it to myself until year 7. I said I think sometimes you can see something clearly and still choose not to look at it directly because looking at it makes it real. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I could see it from the outside. I never knew if I should say something." I told her it would not have changed anything. She nodded like she had already suspected that was the answer. We went back to counting flats of Russian sage and neither of us brought it up again that night, but something shifted after that. Not dramatically, just. The air was a little different. About a month in, Claire called. I did not know she knew where Nora was. I did not know if Nora had told her or if she had found out some other way. All I knew was that my phone rang on a Wednesday morning while I was repotting some overwintering fuchsias, and it was Claire's number, and when I answered she said my name in the flat voice she used when she was trying to sound controlled. She asked if Nora was staying with me. I said yes. There was a silence on the line that lasted long enough that I thought maybe the call had dropped. Then she said, "Daniel?" I said, "Claire?" She said, "That is my sister." I said I was aware of that. She said, "I need you to understand how that looks." I did not say anything to that because I did not think it deserved an answer. She said, "I just think it is strange is all. She has other options. She has friends. She does not need to be staying at your place." I asked if she had said any of this to Nora. She had not called Nora. She had called me. I noted that and moved on. I told her that Nora was an adult, and she had come here on her own, and she was welcome to stay as long as she needed to, and that was the end of the conversation as far as I was concerned. After I hung up, I went back to the fuchsias, and I thought about what Claire had said. That is my sister. As if Nora belonged to her in some way I was trespassing on, as if a woman in her 30s who had driven an hour and a half with no destination was not allowed to stop wherever she felt safe. I did not say anything to Nora about the call that day. I went back and forth on it. That evening she came out to the greenhouse where I was doing end-of-day checks, and she said Claire had texted her. She was looking at the potting bench when she said it, not at me. I could see from the way she was holding her jaw that she was deciding how much to say. I told her I knew. I said Claire had called me. She looked at me then. She said, "What did she say?" I told her, all of it plainly. I figured she deserved the plainness. She nodded slowly. She said, "She does that. She decides what things mean before she knows what they are." She picked up a plant tag from the bench and turned it over in her hands. "She is not a bad person. She just takes up a lot of space." I said I knew. Nora set the plant tag down. "I am not going anywhere," she said. "I want to be clear about that. Not because of her." I said okay. She went back to the house. I stayed in the greenhouse for a while and thought about what I was feeling, and I did not have a clean name for it, but it was not nothing. She got a job offer in late November, landscape design firm in Kingston, 40 minutes south. She came to tell me in the morning before I went out, and she was careful about how she said it, like she was giving me something and taking something away at the same time. She said she could start looking for apartments in Kingston. I said she did not have to do that if she did not want to. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "What does that mean?" I had not exactly planned to say anything in particular, but I found myself telling her the truth, which was that the house was quieter when she was not in it, and I had noticed that, and I was not sure I wanted to go back to the way it had been. I said it badly, probably. I said it the way I say most things, which is straight and without decoration, and I watched her face while I said it, and she did not look away. When I finished, she said, "I was at your wedding, Daniel." I said I remembered. She said, "I was at your wedding and I watched you be kind to my sister all day, and I thought, she does not know what she has." She stopped. I have been thinking about that day for a long time. I did not know what to say to that. I do not know that there was anything to say. Sometimes information changes the shape of something you thought you already understood, and you just have to stand there and let it settle. I said, "Do you want to stay?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Then stay." She moved her 2 boxes and her duffel bag out of the corner and into the room properly. She bought a lamp she liked at an antique shop in Rhinebeck and put it on the dresser. She planted a row of tulip bulbs along the south side of the house in December, in the last window before the ground froze, and she said they would come up in April, and they did. She drove down to Kingston 3 days a week and worked from the house the other 2, and in the evenings she would sometimes come out to the greenhouses, and we would talk while I worked, or not talk, and both of those things were easy in the way that easy things feel like a small kind of miracle when you have been living without them. Claire called twice more in January. I let Nora handle both calls. She did, and she was calm about it, and after the second call she came and sat down next to me on the porch with her coffee and said, "She will come around, and if she does not, that is her choice to make." I asked if she was okay. She said, "I am better than I have been in years." I believed her because I could see it. She laughed more, she slept better. She stopped being so careful about taking up space. In February there was a bad ice storm that knocked out the power for 2 days. We ran the nursery's backup generator for the greenhouses to keep the overwinters from freezing, and we lit candles in the house and ate soup out of a pot on the gas stove and played cards at the kitchen table with a flashlight propped between us. And at some point she laughed at something I said, and the candle on the table between us made her look like herself, in the way that people sometimes look most like themselves, in the least polished moments, and I told her that. She looked at me across the table and she said, "I really like being here, Daniel." I said, "I know. I can tell." And then I said, "I like you being here." She reached across the table and she took my hand, and she did not say anything, and I did not say anything, and outside the ice was still clicking against the windows, and the candle burned down, and neither of us moved for a long time. That was 2 winters ago now. The tulips she planted are on their 3rd season. She added a long bed of peonies along the east fence last spring, and they came in heavy and pink in June, and she cut a bunch for the kitchen table and left them in a mason jar, and they were there for 2 weeks before they finally gave up. She is still at the Kingston firm. She got promoted in October, and she has started designing residential gardens on her own time, mostly for older clients who want low-maintenance plantings, and she has a gift for it that I recognized the first time I watched her talk to a client, the way she listens before she suggests anything, the way she never pushes an idea the other person is not ready for. We are not dramatic people. We do not make speeches at each other. We argue sometimes about small things, how to spend Sundays, whether the compost pile is too close to the fence line, what temperature a house should be in November, and we resolve them the way people resolve things when they are actually willing to hear each other out. Claire came to visit in the spring of last year. Nora had invited her, and I had said I was fine with it, and I meant it. She was different than I remembered, softer in some way, or maybe just smaller without the amplification of a shared life to make everything louder. We were polite to each other. We talked about the nursery, and she asked genuine questions and I answered them. At the end of the afternoon she stood on the porch and looked out at the beds and the greenhouses, and she said, quietly and not to either of us in particular, "It is a nice place." It is. I know that now in a way I did not know it for a long time. Some people come into your life through the front door, announced and expected, and they stay until they don't. And some people come up a gravel drive on a Tuesday in October with a cracked taillight and a canvas jacket too light for the weather and a look on their face like they are not sure you will let them stay. You think you are the one doing them a kindness. You find out later that you had it backward. The frogs are back in the pond this year. I can hear them right now, through the open door, doing what they do every spring, making the most noise possible just to remind you that winter did not win. Nora is on the porch reading. I can see her through the window. She is wearing the old gray sweater she found in the hall closet in November and claimed before I could argue, which I was not going to argue because it looked better on her than it ever looked on me. In a few minutes I will go out there. I will sit down next to her. She will not look up from her book, but she will reach over and put her hand on my arm, because that is the thing she does, and it is enough, and then more than enough, the way the right things always are.